Plan community engagement session. Today we will be discussing food systems. We'll get started here just a couple of minutes after the hour. In the meantime, if you'd like to share who you are or what interests you most in this topic, please feel free to use the chat feature and we can get the conversation started early. So again, feel free to use the chat if you'd like to share who you are, what group or agency you might be representing today. And if you'd like to, please share with us what interests you most about this topic of food systems. So again, welcome to the City of Mesa's Climate Action Plan Community Input Session. Today we will be discussing food systems. My name is Teresa Jackson, and I'm with a firm called Greenplay, and we're supporting the City of Mesa with the community engagement portion of the Climate Action Plan. As the city works towards developing a public-facing climate action plan, focusing on community-based action items is a key goal. So today's meeting is in a webinar format. Participants are currently muted. However, during the second half of the meeting, we really want to hear from you. So there will be two ways for you to engage with our panelists today. You'll be able to share your thoughts, your ideas, your comments through the chat feature. Or if you'd like to speak directly with one of our panelists, you can use the raise hand feature on your toolbar, and I can unmute you and you can directly have that conversation with them. So through the community engagement process, we want to gather input from all areas and demographics of the community. So before we get started today, I do have three quick poll questions for you to get an understanding of who we're talking to. So I'm going to put the first one up here. And I want to ask if you could select which of these best describes you. And you can check more than one. Do you live in Mesa, work in Mesa, play in Mesa, study in Mesa, or own a business in Mesa? We're about at 80%. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds here. Great. Thank you. Our next poll is about an ethnicity. What is your ethnicity? And again, you can select multiple. We have white, Hispanic, Latino, Black, African American, Native American, American Indian, Asian Pacific Islander, or other. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, we have one more for you today, and it's related to the area of Mesa where you live or you most frequently visit, and we're asking you to identify that council district. And so you should see a map of Mesa on your screen now so you can identify that district. We're at about 75. I'm going to give it a few more seconds. This one sometimes takes a bit longer. And if anyone isn't quite sure, then you can always put the nearest intersection in the chat and we can add your district later. Great, thank you. So next, to kick things off today, I'd like to introduce Scott Boucher. Scott is the Director of the Environmental Management and Sustainability Department for the City of Mesa. Scott, can you take a few minutes to introduce the CAP as well as our panelists for today?
Most certainly. Thank you, Teresa, and good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Scott Boucher, and I'm the Director of Environmental Management and Sustainability here at the city. If you want to go to the next slide, Teresa. So the climate action plan, really, this is a council-led initiative. The council meets once a year and does a strategic planning session. At their last strategic planning session, they created a new strategic initiative, which is healthy environment. And you can see it is to proactively and responsibly protect and conserve Mesa's environment and natural resources to mitigate climate change by reducing carbon pollution. So after the creation of this initiative, they tasked staff with putting together Mesa's first climate action plan, which we put together, and that was then approved by council in June of this year. Now we understand that this is a living document and it will evolve over time as resources and new technologies become available. And one of the things we're doing now is this, the input we're getting from the community so that we can come up with our next climate action plan, which will be more involved with community-wide as opposed to just city operations. The next slide. So obviously, if you're here today listening to us, you've been able to interact with the city and get information about the climate action plan, but I would encourage you to go to our webpage, footprintfuturemesa.com. And there's more information that's available there and more opportunities for you to provide your input, which we'll be able to use as we put together the next version of our climate action plan. So we can go to the next slide. So this is an example. If you also go to our climate action webpage at mesaaz.gov, you'll see some of our current performance measures and what we are measuring to see the progress that we're making on our aspirational goals, which I'll mention just here in a moment. So you can see we're measuring building energy usage, the types of street lamps we have, gas use, water use in city facilities. So these are existing, I will tell you, these were existing performance measures that the city has had. So sustainability is not a new concept to the city, but what is new was putting it all of this information and programs under the umbrella of a climate action plan. So we can go to the next slide. So as part of the climate action plan, we have 4 aspirational goals. You can see aspirational goal is carbon neutrality, and to achieve that by 2050. We're also striving to reduce our carbon footprint of city operations by 50% by 2030. Aspirational goal number 2 is related to renewable energy, and that is to prioritize the use of renewable energy and achieve 100% renewable energy by 2050. Aspirational goal number 3 with materials management is to divert 90% of the waste from the landfill by 2050. And then aspirational goal number 4 is what we are working on today, which is to develop a community-based action items to be incorporated into our climate action plan. So that's today, and throughout this series and through the websites that I mentioned earlier is really an opportunity for residents, businesses, students, anybody who has lived, work, play in the city of Mesa, goes to school in the city of Mesa, to get your input as we put together the next version of our plan. So there are 6 focus areas within the climate action plan. You can see energy, air quality, heat mitigation, water stewardship, materials management, and food systems, which we will be discussing today. And I just want folks to know that these aren't really silos that are separate from each other. These are all interrelated, but what it does is it allows us to put together in a more easily identifiable format the progress that we're making in certain areas. And what I mean by where they're not silos and they're connected, the example I like to give is that there's a water energy nexus. So it takes a significant amount of energy to produce the drinking water that is delivered to your home or business. And then it takes even more energy to treat the wastewater that leaves your home or business and goes to one of our wastewater treatment plants. So when you're saving water, you are saving energy. And then when you save energy, because we're not at a point that we have 100% carbon-free energy that we're using, you also help with air quality and with heat mitigation. So as you can see, just through saving water, it crosses across those other focus areas and has an effect in other areas. So the first thing we did as part of our climate action plan, we really had to set a baseline for our city operations. I'll just mention one more time that the first version of the climate action plan focuses solely on our city operations. So it's what the city has day-to-day responsibilities for. So what we did is we put together a carbon footprint of the city's emissions from our operations. And as you can see, there's really 5 large categories in there between employee commute and mobile combustion. So that would be employees driving to and from work and driving at work, building electricity that is used in our city facilities, street lighting, and then going back to the discussion I had of the water energy nexus, our water distribution systems. And so we have projects and programs in place that we're working on with departments and putting new policies and programs in place to help us reduce the emissions in these areas. In addition to that, Maricopa County did a 2018 community greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So this covers the entire city, not just city operations. And so this is what we will also be using as we move forward in looking at a community-wide plan and tracking the progress that we are making as a community. So today it is my pleasure to introduce Donna DiFrancesco, who is a conservation coordinator with the city of Mesa and really is our sustainability outreach guru. She is very passionate, very knowledgeable, and it is my pleasure to introduce Donna and let her explain to you the focus area of food systems today. So Donna?
Thank you very much, Scott. And thank you, Teresa, as well. And thank you to everyone who's here today. Teresa, I know we're going to start out with another little fun trivia, I think. Okay, so what is the difference in the carbon footprint or the emissions or climate impact of your food when you're comparing a plant-based meal versus a meal containing beef? What do you think? Is it 10 times less for plant-based, 8 times less, 4 times less, or 2 times less?
We are at 80%. We'll give it another minute here. And now it looks like we've got just about everyone. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results.
10 times. Very good. All right. Interesting. So here's when I came up there, you know, we've been doing trivia questions on all of these talks, and I started looking into this, and what I found was so much different conflicting information about this question that I'm going to give everyone the pass that you got the correct answer. So we're going to accept all the answers. But the truth is that it's complicated, right? It's not, and we're not here to shame anyone for having a hamburger, by the way. I want to get that right out there. But we do know that food production for especially things like cattle and other livestock, then we even have to have extra resources because we have to grow crops for them first and feed the animals. And then, you know, and that's our food that we then produce. But there's also the fact that cattle produces methane through their digestive process. So we do know for the most part that for certainly for meats and those types of things, it's going to have a higher footprint than vegetables and other products like that. But I also saw a chart that said a chocolate bar from a deforested rainforest emits more CO2 than a serving of low impact beef. So there you go. So so it really can vary, and let's talk about why that is. So on this first slide, we're talking about local sustainable food systems. And those food systems is really all about how we produce, process, transport, store, and dispose of those foods, and all the different ways that can contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Now, Scott mentioned just a moment ago about our 6 focus areas and how they can all interrelate and have co-benefits. And Scott, I think I got all 5 of them here, and food systems is the 6th. So basically, and you know, as I talk about some of the things here today, you know, you can definitely see where energy can be a part of our food systems, and certainly transportation and all that, the air quality just because of the emissions, and even, you know, even farming, even here in Arizona, we get a lot of particulate pollution from tilling and things like that. The urban heat mitigation, certainly having green spaces helps to cool our environment. Water stewardship is so critical because water is needed so much for our agricultural production. And then materials management, which is the waste or the production of materials to process and all that. So there's just a lot of different ways that how we handle our food systems can make a difference. Go ahead and next slide, please. So let's start a little bit with, first of all, talking more broadly. So really for sustainable food systems, we also want to make sure that there's equitable access of affordable, healthy food to everyone. And to, again, that big part of it is reducing food waste, not only during the whole processing, but also just once it gets into individuals' hands, we want to try to reduce food waste. But we basically want to ensure that our food is fresh and nutritious. Food that's grown more locally typically is going to provide us that. But we also want our foods to be grown without harm to the producers or the workers. We want foods to be grown without harm to our community members or the environment. Next slide, please. So this is kind of one of those, which came first? Is it the chicken or the egg, or maybe it's a to be or not to be question? But Mike, the question here is, does climate change impact food production, or does food production impact climate change? The answer is yes. It really can go both ways. So, we know that agriculture has been at the mercy of, is always at the mercy of unpredictable weather. But of course, with climate change and these weather extremes that we see, then it's even more vulnerable and impacted. We need to focus greater efforts to grow our foods more sustainably. And that means sometimes a lot better soil management, things like reducing tillage, and there are ways that we can keep more carbon in the soil with our growing techniques. Next slide. Here's a great but concerning example of how our food systems can be impacted by climate change. This is almond groves in California that had been dried up and lost during the 2018 drought in California when they had such severe cutbacks on water. And, it's one thing to lose a crop of maybe a lettuce for a season, it's just a seasonal crop. But when you have things like these orchards where there's so much time and years, resources that have been invested, it's really tough to see losses like that. But just bringing it closer to home, we have the Colorado River shortage that is going to, the declaration will happen January 1st. And that means that there are going to be cuts to our Arizona farmers. And depending on how long this drought continues and how severe the situation is, there definitely will be severe cutbacks with the water deliveries. And in many cases, farmers may be paid to leave their fields fallow. Next slide, please. So let's talk further about how food systems might be contributing to climate change. The last slides, we were talking about how climate change is impacting our food systems. One thing we know is our corporate large-scale farming methods, they are amazing with how much they increase yields and lowered food costs, but they've also had an environmental cost. And so we want to look at what can we do with either improving some of those methods or just maybe changing again to smaller scale farming to see if that would also be a benefit. We talked about water being really important, and that's one of the things that we really still have to look at, more efficient use of our water sources, and especially places like Arizona where water is limited. We want to make sure that these farms are using less pesticides that can cause both air and water pollution, and any other ways that we can help to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions. One of the other big things is how we process foods for the market. And I want to give you an example of back in 2012, one of the latest American food crazes was for Greek yogurt. And companies like Chobani up in upstate New York, they were in 2012 produced 315,000 tons of yogurt that year. And of course, the yogurts, the Greek yogurts, made by straining the liquid out of the yogurt. That's how it makes it thicker and higher protein content. But that straining process left 630,000 tons of whey, like curds and whey left behind as waste. And, you know, that was just becoming a real serious issue and a waste product for them. So they had to they did eventually look at using it more in animal feeds and biofuels. So things like that can really make a difference. And then how we transport and distribute our foods. And, you know, this is showing a banana on a plane there in the picture. You know, we do know that so many of the foods get transported long distances. And that's what we call those food miles, the number of miles that our food has to travel from the grower to the plate. And of course, the more miles, the more fuel, the more CO2 emissions. Next slide, please. So one of the things we can do, and especially as individuals, is look at purchasing or growing our own foods and trying to do more locally. And then we have certainly a lot less of that transportation costs and even things like refrigeration or preservation. So those things can make a big difference. Next slide. One way, backyard gardens, right? Grow your own foods out and back. I've seen so many different ways people have put together some really creative ways to put their gardens in. And there's even a little sample in the lower right of just, you know, planting things in pots. I have a friend who grew up in Nebraska and she grows corn. She rows of corn in her backyard. She does a great, amazing job. I still don't know how she does it either. But there are some amazing things that people do grow in their own backyards here. Next slide. And then there's other things, you know, we know here in Arizona where citrus is very easy to grow. So, you know, everybody's got to have a lemon or an orange tree. Actually, you need one lemon tree per neighborhood, but you basically can really have a great edible landscape. I've got a picture here of apricots, and figs do really well. And of course, you can even do deciduous fruits like peaches and apples if you purchase the right varieties. But I also put examples here of mesquite pods because, you know, people harvest mesquite pods and grind it up and make mesquite flour and use that for cooking. And then the prickly pear certainly is very great edible desert plant. So we can do that as well. Next slide. And of course, there's raising backyard chickens. So things like that. You can have the Mesa City Code reads you can have a total of 10 fowl, including rabbits. There are allowed on lots less than a half acre. So there's a lot more to the code. There's a lot more to looking at some of the different requirements of it. So I would recommend, if you are interested in this, to check that out on our website. Next slide. So if you're not doing these things in your own backyard, or you just might want to be working with other people, there's community gardens. And so we've got Mesa Urban Garden. It's right in the downtown area that's showing here on the left. There's so many examples of community gardens that I want to show you. There's Harvest to Hope is a beautiful one that's been going on for many years at the Bethlehem Lutheran Church at 32nd and McDowell here in Mesa. That sounds like it could be Phoenix, but it's in Mesa. So there's just a lot of fun things. But I want to go back to Mesa Urban Garden, tell you a little bit about that. You can go to the next slide. This started out in 2011, and actually 2009, with the downturn, people were looking at a lot of the vacant parcels we had downtown, and it was through something called the iMesa initiative that the public was participating in that process too, and letting the city know what kinds of things they'd like to see. And one of them was to put some community gardens in. So we put out a request for proposals, and we got a fantastic one from a group of students from ASU School of Sustainability and other community members who had come together to put this proposal in, called Mesa Urban Garden, or MUG for short. And this was a parcel. It's on corner of Hibbert and First Avenue. And this is how it started out. It was 2 residential properties. And you can see very plain here. They started out by putting the mural up, which was fantastic. And the next slide, please. And so still going strong today. There's about over 80 beds that are that we plant, and many of them are available to community members. This is somebody that's growing her own foods. You can go to the next slide, but she did share them with me, by the way. She gave me a batch of those delicious greens. And then they also have these community beds that are that we just will grow some crops. We have volunteers come in and help us out, and those will get donated to food. We always send stuff to United Food Bank because they're our local food bank. So next slide, please. And speaking of food bank, so this is just something, and I, as I was putting this together, I came across this. I did not know this had happened, but just on November 6th, a few weeks ago, Sprouts Farmers Market went out to United Food Bank, and looks like they've fenced off a little area that they're doing their own community gardens. So again, these community gardens, it's great that they're just popping up. You can see they kind of did an interesting little system here of planting right in the bags of soil, which is probably a great way to do a little temporary garden or seasonal garden. Next slide. And then just another example, this is even at a local business. It's ER2, Electronically Responsible Recyclers. It's a really great company. They take in electronics and refurbish and resell, and then recycle anything else that they can't resell. And one of the staff there was really into community gardens, and they started a bed there for the staff who wanted to participate. So these things can end up anywhere. Next slide. To supplement and get even more local food, you can go to your local farmers market. This is the downtown Mesa Farmers Market at Mesa Arts Center, and you can see current hours from fall through spring, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. It's just a lot of fun. A lot of different vendors there, and fresh breads and all kinds of great things. Eco Suburbia is a great little local farm that's bringing in fresh crops. They're right here in Mesa as well. Next slide. Then there's something called CSAs, Community Supported Agriculture. And so this is when you actually subscribe to a farmer's harvest. And so what you're going to do is tell them, pay in advance to get boxes full of whatever they're harvesting at the time. I put the picture of Crooked Sky Farm here because I used to belong to their CSA, and it was just amazing. And we would get a box full of stuff, and then you're like, what is that? So sometimes it makes you look at, cook up with things that you might not normally buy, but everything was delicious and fresh. And it was just a lot of fun to participate in something like that. And you go to localharvest.org and you can learn about what CSAs are close by for you to make it convenient. Next slide. Another really cool idea and concept is like these indoor farmers markets. And this was really exciting when I saw this open up about a year ago. It is right on Main Street, called Main Street Harvest, perfect name for it. And they have all kinds of, basically they brought a lot of the market people to this indoor setting. And so they're open, I think at least, they might even be open 7 days a week, but double check on that. This was actually started by Proof Bread because Proof Bread was building their bakery right next door. And in the process of while they were building, they wanted to be able to sell the bread downtown. So they've had their bread there as well. And so it's just been a really fun concept. And Proof Bread's now fully open. You got to go there too. They do baking classes. And so get your fresh bread there as well. Next slide. So how is it local government can help out with things and initiatives like this? And just a few things I wanted to point out here is we do have the seed library at Mesa, Maine and Red Mountain Branch. It's like a little card catalog, but inside, instead of cards, they're little packets of seeds. You can check out 3 seeds at each visit. And so they do kind of ask if you have extra seeds to bring them back in, and they share those too, but it's not mandatory. We won't come collecting fines from you or anything if you don't. But so that's a way to get seeds out there to people. We also have the Mesa Backyard Composting Program. This is a great, love this program where our solid waste folks will take old bins that are broken or need some repair. They will refurbish them. Basically, they're repurposing them. They actually drill holes in it so you get the oxygen in there, which is needed for composting. They cut the bottom off, and for $5 one-time fee, they'll bring this to your house, and then you keep it, and you do your own composting to help you with your gardens. We often work with Mesa Library to do classes, gardening classes, and even composting classes, all types of things like that. And we've had those gardening classes also at Mesa Urban Garden. And just one of the things I want to tell you about, we told you the story a little bit about how we worked with Mesa Urban Garden at the beginning, but we lease that land, that is city property. We are leasing that land to this nonprofit group and trying to, provide support to them as much as we can. They pay for all their own water. They take care of, practically everything else, but we just try to support them in any way we can and with promotions and things like that. The other thing I think is, I mentioned the ordinances for having chickens. There was a lot of cities that didn't allow chickens for a while. I think a lot of them have decided that that's a good thing to do. So, but it's those are things too that I think we need to look at ordinances to make sure it's easy for people to actually implement some of these different programs and things. Next slide. Collaboration, though, is key, like it has been, I think, with almost everything we've talked about regarding the climate action plan. But we are so fortunate that we have these great educational institutions here in our state and close by. I don't have ASU here, but I know they provide tremendous information and research and things that are needed. But Mesa Community College has a sustainable agriculture program. They do offer some great focus areas, even beekeeping, greenhouse production, and urban agriculture, both for rural and urban areas. They do even aquaculture and things. Then the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension, they have a school and community gardens program. So they have staff and master gardeners that will work with you if you do want to put in a community garden to help out, or what's fun at the school gardens, because it's really great to get those in the schools and get the kids exposed to how to garden and those kinds of things. You can see a little flyer here on the right of a seminar that they provided. So they do a lot of education, and sometimes they get grants where they can provide resources and support as well. Then there's educational organizations or nonprofits. You can go back one just for a second here. There's the Urban Farm, which is in Phoenix. And then there's, they do a lot of classes. They have a great example. You can go out to their location and see some of the things they're doing. They sell fruit trees. They do a lot for the community. And then Local First Arizona has Good Food Finder. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a minute. Go ahead, next slide. So we're going to switch a little bit and talk a little bit more about just these sustainable food systems. What are some of the other things? And that would include things like food distribution, having commercial kitchens, providing opportunities for people to glean for foods in fields and things like that, supporting culturally diverse foods, businesses that are selling those foods, and other ways to incorporate sustainable ag. This is an example of United Food Bank at the Mesa Convention Center, and this is during the pandemic. And the cars that you can see in the background behind these tents are cars that are actually lined up to do the drive-through. It was an incredible partnership that the United Food Bank and the city and other volunteer groups were able to distribute food in need during that time, especially when people couldn't stop in, and we were trying to have a lot less exposure to people. Go ahead, next slide. Here's a different Local First Arizona initiative where they created this community kitchen. And it's at 659 East Main Street at the El Rancho del Sol. It's a community, apartment community. And in the lower level of the building there, they have a commercial kitchen, and they've used that for a restaurant boot camp where they do training for businesses to figure out how to start their own restaurant. And then the kitchen can be used by cooks who want to do catering or a pop-up restaurant. And then they even do community support with classes for the families that live in this community. Go ahead, next slide. This just shows you a little example of what that looks like. It's a really nice kitchen. That mural is hand painted, just such a cool piece of artwork there. And you can see how they're showing the kids how to cook in this picture. Next slide. The gleaning and food recovery is all about, harvesting unpicked foods that maybe the local farms have decided they're, don't need. A good example are the fruit trees in our neighborhoods. We see that a lot where people are like, I don't need all that grapefruit. And so they, you can bring groups and volunteer groups to pick the fruit and use it in other places. That can be donated to food banks or community kitchens. This is often opened up to refugee groups to come in and be able to pick foods and maybe even cook them up and sell them. And it definitely is great at reducing food waste. Next slide. And then culturally diverse options, things like the ranch market here in Mesa. You can see just some of the beautiful foods, the nopals, the agua frescas. Next slide. We also have Mekong Plaza with so many of the unique Asian foods that are available. Next slide. And we even have, the H Mart and Asiana Market with Korean foods. We have Lotus Market has foods from India. Baez has the Middle Eastern foods. So we really have some really nice selections with our grocery stores, and they're so much fun to go into. But I wanted to tell a little quick story about this Asian district, it has 70 Asian themed restaurants and businesses along a 2-mile stretch on Dobson Road. And this development of all these businesses really happened organically, but our economic development department, recognized this as a really amazing asset, and they hired a consultant to work with the businesses, and they came up with it's a great story to look more about this logo. It's got a great story behind it, and Mesa's continuing to work at how we can connect those businesses better, have better mobility along that roadway, and have special celebration events. You can learn more at the website noted here. Next slide. So just in final slides, we want to talk about cultivating sustainable agriculture. I again wanted to show this as an example at Mesa Urban Garden. This was in August of 2021. You can see all the other beds are pretty much fallow, and this one bed has all these plants growing in it. And this gentleman, his name's Chris, he's worked with Native Seed Search, and he's brought in a lot of seeds that Native Americans used to grow, and for the monsoon season, you can see how well they're doing. So there's just different ways that we can think about how we grow things. Next slide. Another interesting example is Recycled City, and they're basically taking food waste to compost, to farm, to plate. So they bring you out these buckets that you can see on the left. You can put all kinds of food waste. It can be meat, bones, breads, all kinds of things. It's not the typical what we think of as compostable material. They'll pick that up. They bring it to their farm, they compost it there, then they apply it to their crops, and then they'll even bring you food back. So they actually have a really cool system where they'll actually pick up your waste and bring you food. Next slide. And then this was a great example of the Freeman Corn Patch, which is right at Center and Brown. This was some information that Good Food Finder that I was telling you about from Local First Arizona, and this is what they wrote on their site, which I thought was cool. It's supporting your local economy, it's healthier and it tastes better, it's good for the environment, it builds green spaces, biodiversity, and so it has just all those benefits. And the final slide I think we have is the Steadfast Farms at Eastmark. Again, a really interesting concept. This is right out at the development at Eastmark in Southeast Mesa. And it's a 2-acre farm. They do the eggs, CSA, farmers markets. And so how cool would that be just to have a place like that right in your neighborhood that you could go get all your fresh crops. Okay, next slide. And just a picture from Reba Farms at Mesa Farmers Market. I just love the colors and everything in here. Again, all local produce. So thank you so much for your attention today. And we're here now to say, what sustainable food ideas do you have? Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we would love to just open it up to our attendees to share their ideas, their thoughts, pose questions to Donna or Scott concerning this topic of food systems. You have 2 ways that you can participate. You can put a message into the chat, which we'll share, or you can use the raise hand feature on your Zoom toolbar, and I can unmute you and you can speak directly to our panelist. So we're waiting for questions to come in. Donna, you had mentioned the membership that you can get to have fresh food sent to your home. And I right away thought, oh, that would be such a great Christmas gift for my in-laws. They would absolutely love that. So
Oh,
thank you for that tip.
great idea. Get your Christmas shopping all done.
Yes, I can't wait to get on that website.
I do notice that, I don't know if she's still on, Macy mentioned from Aramark at ASU, which is, I've eaten there and I know they do some amazing things. And so they're always looking at how they can reduce their food waste and utilize local foods as well, which is really neat. So welcome, Macy.
Okay, looks like we've got something that came in here from Rachel. At Westwood High School, we have met with our cafeteria staff about food waste at our school. What help can the City of Mesa give to schools that want to help with food waste on their campus?
Very good. Scott, I'm going to let you
Let me take that one.
take that one.
Okay.
Yeah, with the projects that you've been working on. So
Yes, so thank you very much for the question, Rachel. It is something that the City of Mesa is currently working on. So we have a program that we have dubbed Food to Energy, where we would like to take food waste. So again, as we discuss food, what I like to remind people that the highest and best use for an apple is for somebody to eat that apple. We don't want food that is still edible. We would like to have the apple core. And what we're working on doing is being able to process that into what's called a bioslurry and then feed it into our anaerobic digesters to increase the production of biogas. And then we clean up that biogas, inject it into the natural gas utility that the City of Mesa owns, and fuel actually our solid waste vehicles that would be picking up that food waste. So we finished a feasibility study about a year ago. And with that feasibility study, it showed that the first thing we needed to do was put in a gas upgrading system at the wastewater treatment plant. So we're in design, almost complete with design, and we'll go to council at the beginning of next year for approval to begin construction on the gas upgrading system. I will say also, as part of that feasibility study, one of our partners was Mesa Public Schools, because we do service their solid waste. And we partner with them on a lot of their waste initiatives. Unfortunately, as of today, we don't have an answer for you. I kind of explained to you what we're working on, and we're continuing to work on it. I actually had a conversation right before this meeting with somebody in the city manager's office about potential exciting opportunity to be able to move the food to energy program even further along. So I'm hoping that we will have more available. What you can do, though, the number one thing is, again, if you can reduce the amount of food waste that's being generated at the school. As we talk about reduce, reuse, recycle, it's in that order for a reason. So using the food that is brought to the schools is the best thing that we can do. Past that, there can be some opportunities to partner with some of the groups that Donna had mentioned, whether it's a recycled city or doing some composting with the schools themselves. And then on a larger scale, as I said, the city is working on a program. It's just going to take us a little more time before we're able to actually get that to a point that it's scalable to the schools and their kitchens. Hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thanks, Scott. So our next question here, do you know how the city settled on only allowing 10 chickens or rabbits?
that's a good question, and I have no idea. I suspect it did. Scott, do you know?
Okay, so I've had a couple of different roles here at the City of Mesa,
Right,
and
that's
when
right.
we did come up with when the city came up with the ordinances related to animals, there are planning administrator, or that might not have been his direct title.
The zoning
administrator. There you go, Donna. Thank you for the help. He had to come up with a way of balancing how much animals could be on a property without then creating a nuisance. That's what a lot of our codes deal with too. And so it was trying to find that balance. I know they came up with animal units as a way that they measure it. So a chicken is worth so many units versus a horse or a pig is more units than what a chicken would be. But if you have further questions, you can contact our planning and zoning department, and I'm sure they would be happy to walk you through that as far as what you can do on your property. And I also remind folks to check with, if you do live in an check HOA or something else that you're not able to have. So
I was surprised to even see they allow rooster. I wasn't sure we did allow roosters, but it says you can, as long as they're not a nuisance, or, like they just can't be bothering the neighbors too much. So it sounds like it's set up where if there's any nuisance issue, your neighbor can call that in, and you might be contacted by the city. So
we've got a follow-up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Teresa, let me mention one other thing. As Scott mentioned, just look at the site for the details, but there's areas like Lehigh, which is a little bit more rural, as we say, the Lehigh district. So there's areas like that are allowed, more animals to be on your property and things like that. Thank you.
Good to know. So we have another question here. It ties back to the Recycled City. Can Recycled City help with the waste issue at Westwood High School?
It's a good question. I haven't spoken with Recycle City lately. The city of Mesa is the waste provider for waste and recycling provider for Mesa Public Schools. So what I will do, I'll make the commitment to follow up with one of our service representatives that works closely with Mesa Public Schools and seeing what opportunities there could possibly be, not only with Westwood, but some of the other ones. While we work on our own program that we're moving forward, something that we'll be able to cover in between.
Scott, I know when you guys were looking into that program, you're trying to find like what are especially those big sources of food waste. And so I know that you had mentioned things like the grocery stores, even like when they're cleaning up the produce for the produce department, and of course all kinds of other food waste as well. But I would think institutions would be also kind of, the schools or hospitals and those kinds of places would also be big producers.
Yes, we found it becomes, so there is a balance that happens with some of the institutional, whether or not you are just front, if you're back of house, so that means before the food is delivered to somebody, or if you also include the front of house, so after it's been put onto a tray and somebody. The issues that we run into when you go up to the front of house is that you have more contamination that gets into the food waste. So depending, but that is, as our partners in the feasibility study that we did was Bash's as a grocery store, Mesa Public Schools, and then also the United Food Bank, because they have a large amount of food that gets delivered that just is not edible for
That's
folks. Right. And so. And that's one of the ones we're really looking at partnering going forward, is also United Food Bank.
And I like that you pointed out the whole kind of reducing first. I think that's one of the things that even as an individual that we need to do for our own kitchens is, don't buy too much product all at once. Make sure whatever you buy is something that you will be sure to eat, especially before it might perish or spoil. And that you're going to then have to throw it away, because that is what's producing methane, which is one of our potent greenhouse gas emissions. And so it's really managing that food better, or maybe auditing and seeing what, how much waste do we have and why, and you might be able to do some great reductions that way.
Hey, got another question here. Great question. One of the things we would like to propose in the climate action plan is for school districts. Is there a way to collaborate to create a similar plan for schools? This way, young people can have input on the plan and implementing aspects of it on their own campus. So making some youth climate activists.
Rachel, it's a very good question. And I will say that your groups have already had an impact. And so I've told other folks as we put together the climate action plan that I truly believe the work of the Mayor's Youth Committee And then even the youth who have spoken with the mayor and have made it clear to him that climate action is a priority to the youth of Mesa, made an impression upon the mayor. And that is one of the reasons why the city of Mesa currently has a climate action plan. And I'll even point, I am a Mountain View Toro graduate. Westwood has made a huge impact because I have spoken with a lot of folks from Westwood. I would encourage you, so we will be, as a next part of the series is chatting a bit with some of the larger businesses within the city of Mesa too. Mesa Public Schools would be one of those that we'll have some conversations with. But I would also encourage the students in Mesa Public Schools to raise this up through their teachers and their administration and let them know that it's a priority. I would encourage you to let them know that the city of Mesa has adopted this climate action plan and that you feel that Mesa Public Schools should be able to do something similar to that. I think as grassroots and students, you guys really have made a difference and can continue to do that. But we will be doing, to finish that up, we will be doing some outreach after this series is done with some of the businesses, and that'll include Mesa Public Schools.
Great, thank you. So again, we want to encourage our attendees to take this opportunity, pose questions, share ideas. We've got about 10 minutes time here, and it's really important that we hear from you. We want to know your thoughts and feelings on this topic. It's what will really help to lead to some impactful action items that are really community-based. So we have here, can you talk about sustainable food production and biodiversity? How important is it to have different genetic varieties from fruits and vegetables?
Great question. Yeah, it's one of those things that I think when we, again, with some of these big corporate farms and those types of things, you know, you've got this incredible monoculture that's going on. So what I do love about some of these small farms is that you're going to have a lot more of probably just a variety of things grown and a small area. That's definitely creates, you know, just great opportunity for all kinds of other beneficial insects and things like that that come in and appreciate some of those things that are planted. I always let a lot of my vegetables go to seed because I know those little flowers are going to create good pollen and food for some of those other beneficial bugs. A lot of times these farms are also growing heirloom type varieties, and so they're not only growing those so people can get more familiar with them, but it's also maintaining the seed banks for those types of foods, and people are so good at sharing them with a lot of the heirloom varieties. They're not hybrids, and so it's something that the fruits will be true to seed, and you can just collect the seed from your heirloom tomato, which, by the way, oh my gosh, they're so delicious. Such a difference in flavor on those. They're always kind of funky looking sometimes, or they look a little puckered, but man, they are usually very meaty and delicious. And so those will stay true to seed, and you can just put those seeds back out and grow them again, which is fantastic. So those types of things really are very beneficial and provide that biodiversity, provide, you know, just a different environment for the other creatures, wildlife that's out there. So
Great. Thank you. So Donna Scott, how is the city helping the small farms and farmers be successful? Are there plans to help expand potential small farms and local food businesses?
that's a really good question too. And I was hoping somebody was going to say, what more can the city do? Because, you know, when you look at what, you know, I mentioned some of those things that we try to, you know, where we're really trying to encourage people to do more of this, you know, gardening and local growing. Again, there's these other groups out there, that the educational institutions that are like MCC that do a lot. When we first worked with Mesa Urban Garden, you know, I was a little, you know, and we actually have had people ask, you know, hey, we want to do a community garden too. Would you lease us some land? And we've looked into a couple other locations and land options. The city doesn't have a lot of fallow land that is just sitting there and doesn't have they don't have plans for. So so that's pretty limiting. And I think that's what this is all about, is this type of feedback from the public to say, you know, they would like to have the city help out in more ways of encouraging this type of thing. Scott, do you have anything you want to add to that idea?
I don't have any specifics. I know there have been some discussions. I know that our council is very supportive of urban farming. And I've heard that there's some initiatives that are being developed, but I don't have specifics right now. But I am anticipating we probably will have something coming out in the next year or so.
And I think that's what we'd need to look at, especially when it comes to sometimes with the ordinances and things like that, that we need to have opportunities where people can either get some type of variant on that or variance, I think, on that, and to get approval to be able to do maybe a little backyard farm or something like that, you know, with qualifications of some sort. So I think those things could be really really helpful. I think the city has been great at really encouraging a lot of the businesses, and especially anything with downtown. There's so much that for small businesses to promote themselves there, and we're you know, excited about even the breweries or like Cider Core and places like that that are doing some really cool local stuff too. So.
And Caitlin had a follow-up comment here about young farmers who need support.
Absolutely. It's not easy. If you don't grow up with and have land in your family, it's a really difficult thing to get out there and try to start something like that. So there's just, you know, land is expensive and water is expensive. So I agree. It would be great to have more support. And luckily there's even EPA is doing grants now for urban food systems. And so there's potential for those types of things out there as well. And I think that would be something we could certainly educate the public about and facilitate. So.
Well, wonderful. Well, Scott, Donna, any final thoughts before we conclude today's session?
I'll say we're coming up on Thanksgiving, everybody. So eat your leftovers, freeze it so you'll eat it later, or eat your leftovers, and let's make sure we take advantage of all that. You know, actually one of the things real quick is just to say, I think it's crazy the pressure we put on our food systems that we all have to eat the exact same thing every year on Thanksgiving. Every American eats a turkey, every family at least, the sweet potatoes. But anyway, that aside, if we're going to do it, let's just buy what you need and have some delicious fresh food and eat it up.
Wonderful. Scott, any final thoughts?
I would just build on that a little bit also. It's, you know, shopping local, making sure you're buying what you need, you're using what you buy. We have fun even at our home, taking leftovers and creating new creations out of them, or even almost playing like Chopped, if you've watched the show, where you go into the refrigerator and you're going to make a creation out of what is left before it's going to go bad and before you go shopping the next
That's
week.
right.
So, you know, have some fun with it. Get a little adventurous, and you'll be surprised sometimes at what you're able to create.
And somebody mentioned, I see on the chat, eat plant-based. So yes, there's that.
Yes.
Definitely a great option to do those meatless Mondays, and maybe even 3 days a week meatless. So it's a great idea, Caitlin. Thank you.
Well, great. Well, I want to thank everyone for participating in today's session. I encourage you to continue visiting the Footprint for the Future website for updates. And as a reminder, the CAP is a living document, and the city can't affect change alone. So Mesa is focused on working with the public to develop community-based action items that can be included into a planned update. We appreciate the community support to date, and you're going to continue to see a variety of outreach efforts over the coming months. And we do currently have a survey that's been posted. So I encourage you to take the survey and please share it with your friends, your family, your coworkers. This will really help us to understand what might be possible for the community as we continue to develop the CAP. So again, thank you for attending, and please stay in touch with that website so you can continue to participate in these engagement opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
So I don't know if Caroline is still on, but she did ask about the climate action plan. Did you see that, Scott?
I did not see that one.
I missed that.
She's
Carolyn
looking
is still on.
overall. Does climate action plan aspirational goals take into account the city's continued population growth?
We do take that into